We're gonna go over the 4 key aspects that you can use to build a program to help you get jacked and explosive as an athlete. And we're gonna start right now. So a lot of athletes will come up to us and they'll ask that question of, I want to get really, really jacked. I want to have that athletic, toned looking body, right? Like I want to look fit. I want to look shredded, but I also want to be really, really explosive. I want to be fast and I want to be that freak style athlete. And I think that oftentimes the first thing that pops into my head is like, okay, we can do this. We can do this pretty easily. And I even challenge these athletes like, hey, who would you be looking at that makes you feel like that's a body type that we want to have? Someone like Micah Parsons, who's an outside linebacker for the Dallas Cowboys. He's jacked. He's extremely explosive. So another one that might pop into our head might be Saquon Barkley or even Nick Chubb, right? These are guys in the NFL who are definitely jacked and also explosive. Or we can look at some of the best weightlifters in the world. Maybe we want to look like Toma, or maybe we want to look like Jin Chan Kuo. So there's a whole bunch of different factors here. You've got to help the athlete identify who do you actually want to look like. Then the next step goes into what goes into being jacked, what goes into being explosive. These are 2 words that are very, very abstract, but if we can identify where they fall in the form of adaptation, we can build out that program. That's the key concept now. So if we're going to look at somebody who's jacked, typically they have more hypertrophic muscles, and they're also going to be pretty freaking strong because they have more hypertrophic muscles. Okay, if we have somebody who's more twitchy or more explosive, I'll put twitchy or elastic underneath there, they're going to have pretty good range of motion, and they're also going to be very, very athletic. They're going to coordinate quickly. They're going to be able to jump very high, very far. They're going to be able to run very fast. So that almost has more of a measurable. Being explosive has a little bit more of a measurable in comparison to the individual who looks to be more jacked. For men, you know, a lot of people might look at a jacked individual like Nick Chubb and say, I want to have quads like him, or I want to have arms like him. So I think that's where we've got to identify and help the individual athlete break that down. Now, that first key concept, we always have to bring up nutrition, especially when we're talking to athletes, okay? If we want to get jacked and we want to be explosive, we have to recover very, very well. And in almost every single case, if I have an athlete who wants to do these 2 things, the first thing we're going to do is focus on what's their total daily energy expenditure. Okay, so what's their basal metabolic rate? What's the thermic effect of food that they're actually consuming? What's their non-exercise activity thermogenesis? Okay, what's their exercise activity thermogenesis? So we can start to break down how many calories are they using in a day. And typically with high-level athletes who need to be jacked and explosive, they're probably going to benefit from being in a 200 to 300 caloric surplus. That means over time, they might gain a little bit of weight, but they're still going to be very, very jacked because they're going to be so anabolic. Their body's not going to be struggling to recover from all the training that they're doing. So that first key aspect is to focus on what kind of nutrition they need to be focusing on. That second key factor is now we have to get into they want to be twitchy, right? They want to be really, really fast, really, really explosive. They want to be elastic. And what does that mean in the realm of actually training? If we could look at it and say, all right, on day 1, we want to do technical coordination movements. So weightlifting variations, okay? Power snatches, power cleans, behind the neck jerks, push presses. These are movements where you have to be athletic. You have to recruit high threshold motor units consistently at a high rate. So that's gonna help you be more explosive. When we're doing these movements, we're also gonna be doing full range of motion. When we're doing full range of motion movements, it's also gonna help us get more mobility. When we learn how to get more mobility, we learn how to improve our stretch shortening cycle. When we have better stretch shortening cycles, now we can be a little bit more elastic, a little bit twitchier. We can be more explosive. So that second key aspect is focusing on movements that are going to enable you to embody that explosiveness. That might even mean, and this is what we do inside of our app, Peak Strength, what we focus on is on day 3, we do an entire day of plyometric based training. Okay, we get on a PVC pipe, we're gonna be doing hurdle hops, we might be doing stair jumps, jump lunges, single leg bounds, movements like this that will help you become a better athlete, but also help you use that strength that you've gained from those other technical coordination movements. So inside of Peak Strength, when we focus on technical coordination or when we're doing athlete-based training or you're on impulse day, those are key training days that will ultimately lead to helping you become more jacked and more explosive. So that third and fourth key factor, this is when we're gonna start to get into building strength. Okay, building absolute strength. So if I'm talking about absolute strength exercises, I will be talking about back squat, front squat, a single leg squat, a pull-up, a bench press, dips, anything along those lines. Those exercises that are sort of traditional strength-based movements. What we want to look for is doing these movements through full ranges of motion and trying to increase the load on a weekly basis. If we can get stronger and stronger and stronger based off of how much weight we're putting on the bar, based off of the force that we have to recruit, that we have to apply back into the bar to stand it up if we're doing a back squat. So if we could start on week 1, let's say you get peak strength and you're on week 1, you're in the exposure phase and we're trying to get to the ascension phase, the summit phase, and in week 1 of the exposure phase, we're back squatting 225. But week 16, we're at 315 pounds, which is very reasonable to think about, especially inside of peak strength. Now, that absolute strength has gone up. And with so doing, okay, when that's happening, when our absolute strength is increasing, it's also likely that we're going to be increasing muscular mass, muscular size. Okay, we will 100% be achieving myofibrillar hypertrophy, but also with the way that we use drop sets, you're probably going to have some sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So if we can look at 3 and 4 as increasing that overall maximal strength, okay, and increasing then the actual size of the muscle, now we can couple on top of that number 2 aspect, and remember that number 2 being using technical coordination movements, using athletic movements like athlete day or impulse-based training. Now we get the size and we improve the innervation, and we can take that brute strength and make it happen a little bit faster. And that leads us into that next key aspect. And that next key aspect is going to be, we need to make sure that these movements transfer over to the realm of whatever sport we're in. So if we're training for canoeing, we better be able to transfer all of that movement patterns, all the ability of being jacked and being explosive onto the boat. If we're training for wrestling, we better be doing movements and reflexive based movements as well that transfer from the weight room onto the wrestling mat. If we're training for football, we better be able to do the exact same thing. So now we want to focus on what exercises transfer really well, and then on top of that, are there reflexive movements that we can use, like a banded snatch to a hip lock, that will transfer over to a sport like baseball or actually football. And so that's what we're doing inside of Peak Strength. We set up the programs on the back end so that if you're training for football, if you're training for canoe, if you're training for badminton, you're going to have all these key concepts, okay? You're going to have these areas to focus on being as explosive as possible, but you're also going to have these key areas that you might be focusing on to gain a little bit more size, because that's what your sport needs. So now that transfer of training occurs at a high rate, and we go back to focusing on nutrition and overall recovery, focusing on being more explosive, moving heavyweight fast, learning how to get stronger using maximal strength concepts like back squats and front squats, improving our ability to add a little bit more muscular mass and muscular size, and then finding and zeroing in on those key movements that will transfer to your sport. Now, all of a sudden, we're in week 16, and not only have we seen an increase in our power clean or our bench press or our back squat, but we've also seen our performance out on the athletic field increase. That's exactly what we're doing inside of Peak Strength. If you head over to peakstrength.app, you can get 7 free days of training. Test out the app today. You can also pick it up at the Google Play Store, the Apple iOS Store, because remember, freaks, always got to cultivate your power. Peace.